I've I wanted to thank you. I wanted to do this presentation for you, and I played around with some basic cooking techniques, and I borrowed some of my material that I would give to some introductory culinary students. So some of it is going to look a little bit extensive, and most of you are certainly familiar with your way around a kitchen. And for me, I don't use my oven a lot, just because you've got to heat up the whole kitchen with it and then trying to cool it down. And certainly you add 90 or 100 degrees to that. My barbecue, my patio is just 2 steps outside of the kitchen. So I'd rather use something grilled there. And there's a lot of reasons why we use different cooking techniques. And that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with looking at some of the various cooking techniques. How do they differ from each other? What are the advantages of them? So we'll throw in some utensils, some the pots and pans that we use, and always we're talking about taste, we're talking about appearance, we're talking about flavor with them, and all of these bring some really, really interesting things to it. So I'm going to show you a fairly extensive PowerPoint, and then we're going to wrap up with some desserts. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things that I have here. I finally broke down and bought myself a great big heavy Dutch oven. And the other ones are so heavy, as you know. If you have one of those old 4 or 6 quart ones, particularly if you have any difficulty lifting anything, these things are enormously heavy. So this is just about 2 quarts here. And the lid would break your toe easily on it. But I love this. This is a knockoff of Le Creuset, which are very, very expensive. But this is a wonderful tool for those slow cooking. Certainly your crock pot is probably going to be one of your best friends during the summer, particularly with the price of meat the way that it has been. It's a really great way to take maybe those less expensive cuts and just slow cook them. I find it interesting that pork has remained relatively stable. I saw pork ribs, bone-in pork ribs for 97 cents a pound. I saw boneless porks the other day for $1.47. So those are items that work particularly well with that slow cooking technique. I brought out my large deep saucepan here as well. And I like this because it's 2 handles, so I can saute in this. I can baste in this if I want. But the reason I brought this one out in particular is because I want to talk about poaching as well today. And poaching is a wonderful, wonderful method for cooking. So with a lid on this, if you've lost all your lids or if you don't use them anymore, just cover it with aluminum foil or your plate. It'll take care of it. So we'll talk about that. This is a new silicone steaming basket, and I use this a lot. I happen to love steaming. Now, when I moved into my new place, I didn't have a gas stove, so I ended up with electric. And the idea of cooking with electric for a chef is really not a lot of fun to begin with, but I can use my microwave with this as well. It's just got a little snap handle on here. You can put this in really any type of pan for steaming, and steaming is such a great way to cook when it's really hot out also. And then my favorite, of course, I am a saute chef, and we'll talk about sauteing. It's quick, it's fast, you bring flavor, you bring color, you bring aroma, and certainly a great deal of texture to it as well. So we can use this for searing or for sauteing. So we'll explain some of these different techniques. You probably have some of these basic pans, and then we'll go outside and we'll talk about grilling as well. So prepare yourself a nice big lemonade, settle in, and we will talk about different ways to help you out and get you out of the kitchen. So our presentation today is if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And we're going to have some fun imagery here. I'm going to send you a ton of recipes to get you through all these hot summer months here as well. I snapped this picture a couple years ago. I was inside the day that this happened, but I knew it was going to be hot. 122, we may exceed that this year. Certainly all over the country, we've had all kinds of heat records. I think we had the 130 or something like that out in Death Valley. But it's a great time, if you can, to get to the beach, to get to the lake, go up to the mountains or that type of thing. And enjoy it as well, but eventually you're going to have to come in and you're going to have to prepare some food. As Virginia said, yes, Harry Truman was famous for this statement: if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. People quote this all the time. Certainly we're going to borrow it today in regard to cooking. So one of the things about being a professional chef is that you are constantly surrounded by running water, usually hot boiling water on the stove. You've got gas stoves all the time. You've got a lot of electrical appliances. You've got electricity on. And fortunately for us, we have these great big refrigerators. We call them walk-in refrigerators, and usually behind that is a walk-in freezer. And they're not only great for taking out your frustrations. You can go in there and scream at the top of your lungs and nobody can really hear you. They're a great way to take a break from a very, very hot and chaotic kitchen there. So you've got steam. Steaming we'll talk about as well. Steaming is probably one of the more dangerous ones. The two worst burns I've ever received professionally were actually steam burns. And they were just sort of my negligence, unfortunately, because steam can be a wonderful, clean, really fast way to cook, but it also can be very dangerous. So always be aware of these different cooking techniques. And as you master these, you're going to find that you're really going to enjoy some of them. So if we were talking culinary here as well, we would probably be spending the first 4 months maybe on some fundamentals: cleaning, safety, sanitation, menu ingredients, identifying kitchen equipment, how to use it properly, because we have so many appliances and smallwares and pots and pans that many people at home would never use, wouldn't want to use. I know very few people who have built-in deep fryers. When I was in Spain, I was really, really intrigued by the fact that so many homes have a small built-in deep fryer like the one you see there in the top row in the center, because it's part of their cuisine. So I'll talk more about deep frying. I happen to think that deep frying is a really great way to cook, and I will explain that more, so don't run away. Boiling, of course, the old joke is, you know, such a bad cook they can't even boil, but there is a technique to boiling. And if you look at this graphic here, we're talking about dry heat versus moist heat, or combination. And that really is sort of the way that we want to approach this. Now, the last thing you want if you've got humidity is to fill the room with a lot of steam. The cafeteria workers in schools, a lot of them have steamers because they're quick and they're fast, and you can cook a lot of vegetables, for instance, in a short period of time. But once it gets a little bit warm, they tend to move away from these and tend to go towards boiling. Stewing is certainly a great method of cooking. It's slow. The heat is down low. Frying is the opposite. It's really, really quick, whether we're using a lot of oil or a little oil or no oil whatsoever. And then we have a couple of those that we'll talk about baking, why it's so wonderful, but chances are we probably really don't want to do it this time of year. So these different techniques, and I'm going to send you the graphics on these as well for you to maybe keep up on your refrigerator or near the oven to think about, maybe I could do this in a different way. Is deep frying chicken the way to go? Well, it depends on the cut. It depends on the size. Should I grill this fish? Well, maybe it's too delicate. Maybe I need a fish basket for that. Should I pan fry it or should I stir fry it? And all of these can be mastered easily at home. So let's talk about baking, and you really don't need to read all of this. This was really designed for culinary students here, but baking really relies on the fundamentals of science. Now, many of you know that I am not a baker. It's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just, it's a different mindset completely. This is the chemistry of cooking, because if you don't mix ingredients in the right order, in the right measurements, you're going to end up with something that may not be what the recipe intended. I always joke with people, if you don't add the ingredients properly, you're going to end up with a beautiful light chiffon cake, or you're going to end up with stucco. So baking is a lot more precise. As I've become more and more of an experienced cook, I find that I'm doing less baking, though I totally and thoroughly enjoy it. So those of you that make breads or pastry or cookies or muffins, Thank you very much. But this transformation requires a particular type of heat. So this is generally a dry heat cooking as well. And it's in an enclosed space, not over a direct flame. So usually either slow and low or fairly medium high and very quickly. For instance, a roast versus cookies. They don't cook very long. As much as I may get a craving for cookies when it's 112 degrees here, chances are I'm going to grab some yogurt or some fruit because I don't want to turn the oven on to preheat it for 20 minutes only to bake cookies for 10 or 12 minutes. But roasting meats and vegetables is generally what we think of when we talk specifically roasting. Baking, we think about more desserts or savory dishes using flour. So baking and roasting sometimes are interchangeable. Baking has been around for a very, very long time. I would propose to you that probably frying was probably one of the earliest types of cooking. Probably spit cooking, grilling was probably the very earliest. If you were out as a hunter or a gatherer and you found some type of meat, protein, animal, you could just put a stick in it, build a small fire, and you could probably roast it. Think today's barbecue or skewers or that type of thing. Probably followed by some type of deep frying. Once we rendered the fat out of the meat, we were able to use that and cook very, very quickly. Baking probably came later, but certainly reached its pinnacle in the Middle Ages. It's really when we get this expression, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. All of those, you can see how important they are by that old nursery rhyme. But baking with a convection oven, if you don't have a convection oven, if you're considering one, by all means, make that move. I have been very fortunate to work in kitchens with terrific bakers and pastry chefs, and their rotating ovens, the beehive ovens, the enclosed ovens are very, very important. I read a statistic recently that 85% of household ovens are miscalibrated. So if you've just learned to deal with the idiosyncrasies of your oven, next time you call a repairman, have them calibrate your oven for you, because I know we all have these hot spots with them. And the difference between dry baking and convection is circulating air around it. So you're getting that even heat. Think about the difference between standing in front of a warm fire versus going out and getting a blast of 110 degrees like we're going to experience today. So a pizza oven is certainly a variation of that. Down at the bottom in the center, you'll see mosaics from Pompeii where they were definitely using that. And in the Middle Ages, bread became really considered quite an artisan craft. And it inspired me to do a whole class on the history of bread. Baking, obviously, we've got lots and lots of space that we need. We've got a fair amount of ingredients. I don't know any baker who doesn't have more than 6 or 7 pieces of equipment. It might be the baking sheet. It might be the parchment paper. It's the spatula to remove the items. It might be a cooling rack. You might use scoops or a couple of spoons to make those drop biscuits or cookies. You've got the stand mixer. I actually do not even own a stand mixer. If I need something baked, generally I'm going to pop over to Mom's because she loves to bake and she likes that precision of it. Many people do. For me, I'm looking for something maybe a little bit simpler. The benefits of baking, certainly it's a great way to diversify our diet. They don't really take a lot of time to make unless you're making something complex. And the interesting thing about baking is so much of it is in the finishing work. Think about an average cinnamon roll. I can't imagine a cinnamon roll that isn't rolled out, filled with almonds or pecans or walnuts, a little bit of cinnamon, a drizzle on it, even just cookies, a plain batch of sugar cookies isn't very interesting until maybe you add some lemon or turn it into a snickerdoodle or something like that. But this alchemy of eggs and sugar and flour is pretty amazing. Baked goods are starting to get more expensive. You've seen that. A lot of it is the oil. A lot of it is the eggs in there as well. Flour has remained relatively stable. We grow a lot of wheat here and there are specialty flours, but because of the situation in Ukraine, where we get a lot of our wheat, we're going to see some price increases there. Baking is all about its beautiful textures. Just think about the difference between a well-baked cookie and an over-baked cookie, or a really nice light chiffon cake versus a dense chocolate decadence flour cake, for instance. So we can have the range of textures here from flaky and soft to dense or rich or smooth. And that's one of the great things about it. Baking brings a great way for us to bring nutrition into it. We think of baked goods as bad for us, but there's a lot of things that we can add to it. Fruits and vegetables, healthy oils, and even some fruits and nuts into that. The next one that we don't use very much, you all probably have a broiler. It's probably filled with pie tins and muffin tins and excess pans like mine is at the bottom of the oven. But if you worked in a restaurant environment, your broiler is usually up at the top, just above shoulder height. And it's usually a drawer that's superheated from the top. These can exceed 500 degrees. So we're getting this wonderful searing technique. If you've ever seen steaks come off of a broiler, this is a wonderful way to cook it. We call it a salamander in the industry, but it really comes from the Roman tradition of al forno, which means sort of fired and baked in the oven there. But it gives food this wonderful crisp finish and browns on the top. Think au gratin potatoes. Certainly, it's wonderful for steaks because you're getting this sort of direct heat. It's a really combination of sort of baking and grilling, a dry heat, dry technique. The traditional ones that we may have in our home, maybe you have a broiling element at the top. If you've ever touched this, you know it's going to leave an instantaneous burn. They're really not very safe whatsoever. So you never get the right height on them. You want to adjust the rack, but the rack is already 500 degrees. So play around with broiling. But again, you need the oven on for this, generally speaking. If you were to stand in front of one of these broilers in a commercial restaurant, it is just a blast of hot air. The Japanese use a version of this with their yakitori type foods there. These became really popular in the 70s, sort of that beach culture with those old little hibachi grills, those little cast iron grills we take to the beach and things like that. But it's a wonderful way to cook and sear and really bring out flavor. The next one here is roasting. Roasting, again, we need to turn our oven on here. So I want to get some of these out of the way here. That is a picture of a roast chicken that I did before it got too hot here. And these have been wildly popular at grocery stores. They range in price from, $4.99 to $9.99. And the reason that they're so good is they're brined and they're slowly roasted. I think I've mentioned this to you before. The second favorite meal, most memorable meal I ever had was a roast chicken when I was in Paris. Now, let me just sort of set the scene here for you. I hope you've eaten, because if not, you're going to be salivating and be very hungry. But I had spent the day museum hopping, and I was walking along, and this was the day before Christmas, and there were lots of shoppers out and things like that. Well, I didn't want to go and drop 200 euro on an expensive meal that I really wouldn't appreciate. And it got bitterly cold. And the sun goes down very, very early that time of year. And I recognized this meteorological condition from my childhood, but I hadn't experienced it in 50 years. And it started to snow. And I thought, well, I definitely don't want to go back to the hotel and change and then go back out to dinner. And so I passed this beautiful French butcher shop, and they had all kinds of wonderful cuts of meat and exotic game and wild hare and things like that. And in the front of the butcher shop, they had this display case. And imagine something about the size of a soda machine, a Coca-Cola vending machine, for instance. But it was a rotisserie. And these chickens were just roasting on there. Now, these are not our little pink chickens that we get here in the United States. These are those beautiful yellow skinned chickens from the region of Brest. And these chickens are just roasting. And as the grease is falling off of this, it's dripping down to the bottom where they had these beautiful baby potatoes. So I got a whole chicken, I got some of these potatoes, picked up a bottle of wine, went back to my hotel, was able to open up the windows and just watched it snow in Paris. It was really one of my favorite meals of all time, something just that simple. Roasting doesn't require a lot of effort. Time-tested way to get these mouth-watering results. Some of the new things that chefs are using, we're doing roasting vegetables. So if there are vegetables that you don't particularly like or your family doesn't like, try roasting them. And it could be anything from Brussels sprouts to green beans to even cauliflower. And you just want to marinate it. Just toss these in a bowl with your favorite spices, a little bit of olive oil, put them on a baking sheet. And what happens at about 330 degrees, the sugars in the vegetables or the proteins, they start converting to sugar. And so they really take on a very, very different flavor here. And that's what we call caramelization or the Maillard reaction. Chemical science stuff, but that's where we've found that we really get those wonderful savory flavors that we love. Of course, large cuts of meat are absolutely perfect for this. We think of our classic prime rib roast, crown rib roast, crown roast of pork, certainly butterflied chicken there, faster way to roast it on a drip pan there. If you don't have one of these cooling racks, by all means get one, whether using it for cakes or cookies, but set one aside for your roasting items as well, because you want to capture those delicious juices to use back into pan gravies or things like that. The wonderful thing about it is if you cut your vegetables to a uniform size, you can roast them pretty much on the same pan. Sheet pan dinners have become really popular here. I am not a raw carrot fan, but boy, when you roast them with the right kind of spice and a little bit of olive oil, you're going to get a really great flavor. Generally speaking, I want you to use olive oil or some type of vegetable oil. Don't use butter because the butter is going to burn. Save the butter for after and just maybe drizzle it, maybe flavor it up after you've roasted the vegetables. So we're gonna turn the oven off here, and we're gonna do the fundamental here. You know, the old joke is, boiling water, which is hotter, boiling water or steam? Well, boiling is 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees on this planet. But it's a wonderful method to prepare everything from pasta to vegetables, eggs, and even meats. Think about corned beef. I know for a lot of people that just seems so strange to be boiling meat. We think of this as kind of an old-fashioned or more peasant type way of cooking, but in fact, it can be really nice to do. All that requires is just a good size heavy bottom pot or saucepan, some water. You want to make sure that this boiling happens just over simmering here, it's going to be a little bit warmer than what we use for poaching. Advantages and disadvantages. For some of you like me, it was well into my 20s before I realized that broccoli and green beans should still be green after boiling them. Too many people boil them and they boil out all the vitamins and minerals. They certainly boil out the color of them as well. We need those colors in our palate when we're setting a beautiful plate. So don't overboil them. How do we do that? Well, you don't want to put the whole crown of broccoli in there. Break it up into smaller uniform pieces. That's really important because boiling is surrounding it with hot water. And you want to cook the stems and the stalks and the florets. So whether it's carrots or broccoli or cauliflower, snow peas, whatever, save that juice also, because that's going to be an important part of your stock that maybe you can make. I stopped a woman at the grocery store the other day, and she was looking and comparing prices on pre-made stock. And she was kind of surprised at how expensive they were. And I just struck up a conversation. I said, by the way, take a look at the back of them. And they were very, very high in sodium. So I took her over to the produce section. We got some celery, some onion, and some carrots. We got some garlic. And I taught her how to make her own stock. So whenever you're boiling vegetables, save that liquid, whether you're using it in smoothies or whether you're using it in gravies or just making some stock. You can certainly freeze it at that point. Overboiled food, boy, how many cafeterias, how many restaurants has we seen this here as well? I believe in vegetables, it should be al dente. Keep an eye on it when you're cooking, and if possible, incorporate that cooking liquid into what you serve. This is a great way to reduce the fat and still keep the flavor in your sauces after you cook them. You can easily add a little bit of butter to this, a little bit of flavoring, a little bit of spice or fresh herbs to this after you extract that beautiful stock. If you're cooking pasta, boy, we've seen this enough. If you're lucky enough to have one of these pasta pots with the built-in colander, those are wonderful. I cook a lot of different types of noodles. I love Asian noodles. I love Italian noodles. So I'm one of those that generally I do not like salt in my water. It doesn't really help it boil any faster. That's kind of an old wives' tale. It has to do with temperature, not the sodium content. So, but make sure you have a good heavy pot, a stable pot, because the food is going to want to be agitated in there. So keep an eye on that. Test it periodically when it comes to pasta. Too much pasta is overcooked even in restaurants. And certainly if you're doing something like a brisket, slow and low is really the key when you're doing that. The next one is stewing. Stewing is this low and slow cooking method, and it's a key to wonderful recipes from all over the world. Everything from beef bourguignon to an Italian Tuscan stew to our chowders that we have here. This is really takes very, very little effort. It's very economical and it's extraordinarily versatile. And what you're looking to do here is you're looking to layer flavors in here. So you want to start with your aromatics, your herbs, and that type of thing. Sometimes we will add a bouquet garni, a mix of herbs or even spices into this. And you may probably want to remove those. Bay leaf is another one of that. This is similar to braising in that what you want to do is you really want to sear the meat. So what I mean by that is if you're doing, let's say, a pork stew. I did a pork chile verde stew a couple of weeks ago, and I could have just added the pork raw cubed, put the water onto it. I happened to use some beer with it. But what I wanted to do was sear the meat first. So you want to have these smaller pieces or chunks there, and you want to put it into a really hot pan, the same pan that you're going to use for stewing, and just mix it up in there. You really want it to sizzle. You want that Maillard, that caramelization to start. And what it's going to do is it's going to seize up some of the proteins, and then the stewing process is going to break those down. But what it's doing is it's adding all that flavor. So don't forget to sear those pieces of meat or chicken, pork, beef, whatever you're using, then cook them in liquid and using ingredients. You're going to have all kinds of wonderful different textures there with them. So really the difference between braising and stewing there, stewing we're using smaller pieces, maybe that very expensive cut. If you look for stew meat used to be really inexpensive, and they were just the little pieces that the butcher would cut off of the more identifiable ones. But you have to remember now that we're paying for labor, particularly when it comes to butchered items. So every time that the butcher has to handle this protein, the price is going to go up. So to take a full roast and break it down into fillets is one step. So let's say you're adding 50 cents a pound. You're breaking it down into medallions, which are a little bit smaller, about the size of the palm of your hand. You're adding another 50, 60 cents per pound. And then if you want stew meat, you're getting it even more expensive because nobody wants a stew meat that is just gristle and muscle and tendons. So stew meat these days has become really expensive. How you handle it is really important. In braising, we want to cover a good quarter of that. In stews, we want to completely cover it. So use a variety of liquids. Use beer, use wine, use some stock. Add juices to it. Cranberry juice is absolutely wonderful with something like pork because it's going to reduce out. If you're concerned about the alcohol from wine, most of that is going to burn out and it's going to leave a lot of flavor. So in braises, you want to strain out the sort of gunk that builds up there. In a stew, you're going to leave it in there. So you want to use better ingredients initially in a stew because they are going to be part of the final dish. Look at all these wonderful different stews here. I have a whole class on soups and everything from a classic cioppino from Italy to that beautiful bouillabaisse. I would consider that a stew. We have those wonderful tagines. Just about any culture has probably given us really wonderful stews. We certainly have some great ones. Yankee pot roast would probably be one of those that I would think of. So I'll send you some wonderful recipes from stews from around the world. If you look at some of them there, we've got pozole, which is extraordinarily popular here in the Southwest. You've got wonderful stews from around the world, everywhere from the Eastern Republic to even in Japan and Italy. One of my favorite new stews is an Italian pork stew, really, really aromatic. So here's some of the benefits. If you have the time, stewing meats and grains and beans can all be worthwhile because you just sort of set it and forget it here. It allows all the flavors to incorporate together. So this is why you want to use good ingredients, because they are going to be part of the finished product. You have fork tender meats here. You have wonderful grains and vegetables. They're guaranteed to be nice and tender because they've been slow cooking for so long. If you're concerned about some of these items becoming too mushy, if you have fussy eaters, just add them a little bit later in that. And then the nice thing about it with stewing is it retains all of its nutritional qualities, and that's always important. You use very little, if any, oil in this. So you want to make sure that you've got a very, very flavorful broth. If you're using bouillon cubes or things like that, just watch the salt in them as always. Perhaps my favorite way to cook, only because this is one of those that requires a little bit of all of our senses. We want to pay attention to the color, the flavor, the taste, the aroma, and most importantly, saute gives us lots of texture. And I'm a textural chef. I like lots and lots of textures in my food. My favorite foods are from Asia, the stir-fried, lots of different textures and flavors and colors going on. Sauteing is one of those great ways to cook. If you have a good saute pan, you probably want a 9 or a 10-inch one. I think the 12-inch saute pans are just really too big unless they have a taller rim on them, and then you're going to use it for something different. I have a couple of 8-inch ones. This is probably the piece of equipment that gets the most use in a restaurant because it's quick, it's fast, and you get all these wonderful things that hit all of your senses. The word saute means to jump in French. Now, you don't have to be a professional and you don't have to make your food jump 8, 10, 12 inches out of the pan. You're using very, very little oil with this if you need to use any at all. Nonstick pans are absolutely great for this. You can just move this around. If you have a favorite nonstick pan, I am very particular about what I use on this. I never use metal on them. It's always wood. And because of the design of it with the sloped sides, you really get wonderful cooking technique. It really is sort of a scaled down version of a wok, if you think about it. And a wok is one of the best ways of cooking because you have 3 different cooking surfaces. So saute is important. You can layer this in. It's just a lot of fun. This is a technique that a lot of culinary students, they really need to practice this. So get yourself a good saute pan and really enjoy it. Those are my pans up in the upper right. I have weeded through some of them and gotten rid of them, some of them. I love cooking on copper. I don't like the care of it, but it's absolutely great for pork chops or boneless, skinless chicken, sturdy vegetables, potatoes, green tomatoes, onions, asparagus tips. This is my go-to method. I really like this because I know that everything is going to come together and really give me all of those sensory items that I'm looking for. So saute, it says dry cooking, generally speaking. Any chef there is usually a delegated position as the person who does the sauteing. And you got pans just banging around all the time on a big industrial stove. These really, really get beat up. These are the pans when they hit the dishwasher, they're in there scrubbing them. I have a designated pan that I use. It's a saute pan, but I use it for making crepes and it doesn't get used for anything else. But you can imagine that you can constantly sort of layer flavors in here. This is about building flavors. We want to season this really at sort of 2 points, at the beginning and at the end, just as the food is coming out of the pan. Because of the design on it, it slides easily onto a plate and you can add that final seasoning there. Very, very simply, what do you need for a saute pan here? Again, depending on the size that you feel comfortable with. I do a lot of shopping at antique stores and thrift stores. I am seeing lots and lots of these pans there, that copper colored ones that they've been advertising on television. I think a lot of people have been very disappointed with them. Maybe that's why they're showing up. But very, very simple, whether you have some tongs. Rarely do we need a lid when we're sauteing, unless you've got something that's going to splatter. There's the comparison. You can see how it was influenced. The French really sort of took this from the wok idea, just a little bit more manageable. But you need very little equipment on this. Once one part of the meal is prepared, you can easily slide it off on a plate because of the design of the pan and do something else. So in some respects, this can be a 1 or a 2-step phase with it. Sauteing is versatile. It's fast. You get these beautiful brown meats and vegetables there. I can't think of really anything that you can't prepare in this. If you need to make a final sauce with this, once the ingredients come out, you can easily add your liquid into it, whether that's stock or any type of liquid that you have around, and just deglaze the pan a little bit. And that just means that we're getting all those yummy bits that were left during that caramelization process. So we want to use a good fat or oil for even browning if you need to use any at all. So you want a very hot pan with this. So invest in a pan that is going to take that heat. These inexpensive ones tend to warp on you, and you don't need to flip it, but if you want to feel comfortable with it, go ahead. I want to talk just a minute about something that's very vexing for lots of home chefs. It certainly is excruciating for culinary students, and they will spend weeks and weeks and weeks mastering classic vegetable cuts. Now, does it affect the flavor? It absolutely does, because it affects the cooking. So why do they spend so much time on making all these very, very specific sized shapes? Well, it has everything to do with cooking. So for instance, if you're making something like a brunoise dice, now a brunoise is the first one on the left there, 1/8 by 1/8 by 1/8. It's very, very vexing. I won't even do these. Generally, this is sort of finishing. Once you're done with an item, maybe you'll sprinkle some peppers or onions or that type of thing. I have a small chopper, and I just use that. That has that built-in grate. Small dice, a lot easier. Medium dice, that's usually 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. You have large dice. This is great for potatoes, for instance. Julienne, we're familiar with that. You have that chiffonade, and the chiffonade is usually for leafy herbs such as basil or parsley or dill. Just sort of roll it with your hands like you might roll an old-fashioned cigarette, and then just chop it very, very fine into these thin strands. Great for finishing, but the more that we expose, the more surface area, the quicker it's going to cook. And then there is this vexing one down at the bottom left called a tournée. I have seen culinary students and grown chefs just brought to tears. This is a 7-sided dumpling shaped cut. Does it affect the flavor? No. Does it affect the appearance of it? Yes. So you could serve a big spoonful of large diced potatoes, but if you're an expensive restaurant, they'll give you 3 tournées that have just been perfectly brown, and they'll charge you twice as much for it. So it's the labor that goes into this. So keeping your vegetables the same size, thank goodness a lot of these manufacturers and producers have started to turn some of these out. I always like to tease my culinary students on the last day of class, and they're thinking, oh, we're finally done with all these vegetable cuts and we don't ever have to worry about this. And they come into my final class, and I put a potato right in front of them. And I said, all right, give me 3 perfect tournées. And I've got a $100 bill taped to the chalkboard, and whoever can complete it perfectly gets that. About 3 or 4 minutes into it, we've got some of the kids that are really working on this, and they're frustrated, and the potatoes are slipping out of their hands. And then I bring out a small tabletop piece of equipment that you put the whole potato in, and 3 beautiful tournées come out the other end. So chefs are learning that some of these techniques are certainly valuable, but do they affect the meal? Well, sure they do. Why not? Let's talk about fats here. Now that we're into sauteing here, the smoke point is the thing that's most important. So people ask me all the time, butter or lard or olive oil? Well, it depends on the application. And more importantly, it really depends on the smoke point. And the smoke point is the temperature at which that will basically explode. It will burst into flames or it will burn. So we know, certainly in the South, I know that they love to use peanut oil. There's a good reason for that. Its smoke point is 450 degrees. So you could put something in there at a very, very high temperature, and it's not going to deteriorate or break down. Butter, on the other hand, 350 degrees. And we've all been there before. If your pan is too hot and you hit it with butter, it's going to burn. It's the solids in there. Palm oil, high in fat, but 450 degrees there. So if you're using an extra virgin olive oil, we're sort of in between there, 325 to 375 there. Butter will always burn faster. So if you have clarified butter, which the Indians call ghee, you suddenly, by removing those fat solids, you take it up to 450 degrees, which is why chefs love to take 30 pounds of butter, warm it, and then take the heavier parts off of it, the curds off of the top. This is what we see frequently when we're served a lobster tail with what we call drawn butter. Same thing. You can buy this now, but depending on the oil that you're using, avocado oil has been particularly popular, 520 degrees. So it's wonderful for sauteing, certainly more healthful. You're going to pay a little bit more for it, but occasionally it will have just a slight flavor. So most of these are denatured. So the flavor, it doesn't really taste like coconut, doesn't really taste like avocado. So when you're sauteing here, heat the pan and then the fat. So Martin Yan, the famous cook, chef, he said, hot pan, cold oil, food don't stick. And he's right. So heat that pan up. So if you're using electric, bring it down to just about the setting or two before high. Get that pan nice and hot. Test it with a little bit of water. Just get your hands wet. And if the if the water bubbles on there, you know you're probably a little too hot. If it just sort of dances across there like a little dollop of glass, you're in the right temperature zone there. Don't overcrowd the pan. We have a tendency to put too much food in a saute pan. So if you like sauteing, you're going to want probably two. Keep them going left and right hand. Stir them frequently, but not constantly. Why? Because we want to build up that beautiful fond, that caramelization that we're looking for. What do we do with that beautiful caramelized stuff that's in the pan there? Well, we want to create a pan sauce, or what the French would call fond. And after frying or sauteing, you can caramelize these after the proteins or vegetable sugars have caramelized. You can reduce it with wine or beet juice. You can use any type of stock. If you've got leftover wine, this is a great use for that. Juices will work for that, or just simply water will work for that as well. Pan gravy or pan sauce. Generally, if we're talking gravy, we've probably added some type of flour or roux to it, but pan sauce is just the simplest, cleanest way. You've built up all these wonderful flavors. Let's use them. If I find that there's too much liquid left in this, for instance, I will treat my rescue schnauzers and just put their dog food, their dry dog food, right into this pan. Just cook it a little bit more, let it cool. Boy, do they enjoy that. And it really sort of makes the cleanup a little bit easier. Benefits of sauteing here, we get great texture. We have a small amount of oil, so we're keeping a lot of nutrition in there. That's typical for me, having a large saute pan there, maybe one on the side for the vegetables, and then one that I'm going to use for maybe something else. You get high heat, means more flavor because you've got this increased Maillard reaction. So you're seeing that that's an important part in building flavor. Pan frying, we love pan frying, but pan frying and deep frying, I'm going to tell you something that may surprise you. I actually think these are wonderful techniques. This is why. You're using a protein of some sort, generally. You're coating it with an additional element that's going to bring flavor to it, but what you're getting is incredible texture. Now, if you're pan frying or deep frying correctly, the food is not spending a lot of time in the oil. It's not absorbing the oil if you're doing it correctly. This may be one of the most challenging of the techniques to use. If you were raised with pan-fried chicken, for instance, chances are that our moms or grandmothers probably use too much oil with this. So here's a slight distinguishing factor between pan frying and deep fry. It's a form of frying food. Use a minimal amount of fat, typically just enough to lubricate the pan. It's not about adding fat to the ingredients. And this is an important thing to remember. You're adding it so that the food moves around here a little bit. So it's different than sauteing. You're not flipping any of this. This is wonderful for larger pieces of fish or chicken. And notice the shape of the pan on the left. That's a little bit better. So if you're buying a set, look for something that maybe has a longer or a curved handle on it. This is not as intensive on your hands. If you have problems with your hands or elbows, pan frying is a great way to do it. Just don't walk away from it for too long there. We have a very difficult time finding green tomatoes here. I know this is a Southern favorite, and I thank you because I love this item. But what we do have is our tomatillos here in the Southwest. So I use a lot of tomatillos, and I love pan frying these to serve it with a nice spicy mayonnaise on the side. Deep frying, again, we're still sort of in the kitchen here, but when I deep fry, I always take my little fryer outside because A, I don't want that oil hanging in the air. I don't really want that smell. So I have a little portable one that I use outside. It's dry heat in the fact that we're plunging it into something, but not for a very long time here. And we get incredible texture. We get great flavor in this. We get great color. It really brings everything to the table that we're looking for as sensory chefs. We have this beautiful crunch there. It keeps things golden brown, delicious. You have this great crunch. I can't tell you how many times I have sent back French fries, and you have my permission to do this if they're not golden brown and delicious. And they can call me and I will tell them exactly how to do it. You're entitled to that, whether it's French fries or tater tots, whatever it is. Deep frying turkeys has become extraordinarily popular. I don't particularly like it. I think roasting is a much better and certainly safer way to do this. Every year we hear about people ending up in the ER from turkeys that explode because they're using the wrong oil, the wrong temperature, etc. So a commercial one on the left there, these are big, messy, ugly pieces of equipment. If you don't stay on top of these can really get dirty and grimy very fast. We have some wonderful chemicals that we use in the industry that will boil this out. So the oil's been in there for a couple of days. If you're pushing it to 7 days in a restaurant, you're going to be able to taste it. This is a real problem for people with food allergies because frequently they're doing chicken and French fries and fish in the same deep fryer. So there is a potential for cross-contamination. But it's a big, messy job. A lot of restaurants, even more restaurants now, are selling back their rendered oil to facilities where they clean it and they turn it into a fuel, for instance. If you're doing it at home, this is probably my least preferred way for you to do it. You can just simply use a basket there. Make sure you've got the right temperature because it can go from 275 to 425 very, very, very quickly, particularly on gas. If you like deep frying, if you enjoy that style and that flavor and texture of food, I'd recommend you invest in a $20 or $25 little portable tabletop, the Fry Daddies or that type of thing. That's what I use for them. Different type. I never, ever, ever deep fry with olive oil. The smoke point is just too low. You want to use something like a grapeseed oil, which works really well, peanut oil, even just a canola oil is better because you're not going to burn it out. Oil's gotten very expensive, so you want to be able to use that. Can you reuse the oil? Yes, if you don't have a lot of particulates in there, if there's not a lot of those yummy little crunchy bits there, just strain it out, use a colander or use a coffee filter. Store this. At that point, I would keep it in the refrigerator or someplace cool, but you're going to know because once you reuse that, if it starts to smoke right away before it gets to its temperature, chances are that oil is completely burned out and toss it out at that point. Here's some fun things, a little diversion for you. Weird but awesome things to deep fry. Every year at the county fairs, they have all these wonderful different type of deep fried things. And there's just something about it. We love the crunch. We love the color. We love the texture. We can wrap all kinds of wonderful flavors together. Down in the bottom right, that's a lumpia, the Filipino version of egg rolls, little lighter wrappers. I love these. They're great. Wontons, there are times I like wontons that are either steamed or just boiled. Other times I like them deep fried. Calamari is my judge of any Italian restaurant. If it's a new Italian restaurant for me, I'm going to sit down. If they have calamari, I want to ask two questions. One, do you include the tentacles? If they don't, I know that they're probably buying it pre-made. It's been in the freezer. It's been out of the freezer. It's been in the freezer. It's been out of the freezer. It's just not going to be good. If they do their own, that's great. But the end result is what I really want to know. So if it comes out light and flaky and crisp and golden, chances are I might stay and finish and order something from the rest of the menu. But deep frying is absolutely wonderful. This is something that I did last year. I planted some zucchini for the first time, and I planted it at just the right time. And I got these wonderful blossoms. So I didn't want that much zucchini. So this is a great French and Italian tradition on the Riviera. And you take these beautiful zucchini blossoms and you just stuff them with whatever you want. Cheese or goat cheese, cooked meat or pork. You can do vegetarian items on this. And then they're just lightly battered, kind of tempura style, and then deep fried. Some of the other things there, that is deep fried bacon. Talk about adding insult to injury there. You've got deep fried tarantulas. Yes, there are a couple of county fairs that do this. Those wonderful deep fried donut holes. So there isn't anything that can't probably be improved by actually deep frying it. So we'll talk about grill, and then we'll take just a little break here as well. This is ultimately when we think about getting out of the kitchen, what can we grill? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that you've got a good grill. There are lots of inexpensive grills out there. We probably all remember these old-fashioned charcoal grills. I don't know many people who still love charcoal grills. I know a lot of chefs that are grill masters, and they use different flavored woods and aromatics and things like that. It's just so incredibly messy. You're really just sort of taking all the worst of heating up your kitchen and just taking it outside. So you build this charcoal fire there, and you need to get it at the right temperature. And it's only at that right temperature for a fairly short period of time. It doesn't really maintain its consistent heat, but it certainly is fun. It's a great way. It's certainly a portable way to do it. If you had sticks, if you had stone, chances are you were probably able to do this in olden days. But the grill can be a great way to do that. You've got this wonderful searing, so you've got that beautiful caramelization that happens. You got these layers and layers of flavor. Be careful when you're grilling because things can flame up pretty quickly on that. One of the things that I particularly am conscientious about is grilling. So you're taking let's take a chicken breast, for instance. A boneless, skinless chicken breast has very little flavor, but it's one of those easy items, let's say, to put on a grill. So I know you know somebody in your family, in your circle, maybe it's you yourself that does this. This is what happens. We take a plastic bag or a Tupperware container and we marinate our chicken or our beef or our pork for a day or a couple of hours to get all this wonderful flavor. It's, oh, this is going to be so great on the grill. We're going to have these wonderful aromas that are going to be wafting through the neighborhood. And you put it on this open flame, and then inevitably someone is going to come along and say, let me do this. I'm a grill master. All right. And they start poking it. They start poking the pork or the beef or the chicken. And all of those juices that you put in the 4 or 6 or overnight hours, they suddenly just leach out and they have no place to go because a grill, by definition, is to drive away the fat. Well, if you're adding all these wonderful flavors and marinades, they're going away as well. So you end up with exactly what you didn't want, was a nice, moist, flavorful item by adding all of these. So next time you find that person that's poking it, ask them to stand back. Okay, you know what you're doing. Now, the secret here with grilling is you need to let the meat speak to you. What do I mean by that? So let's take this beautiful sirloin steak down at the upper right or the bottom left there. So maybe you've marinated it and maybe you've got these wonderful flavors. So you get the heat just at the right temperature and you're going to lay that meat on there. If you're doing chicken breast, if it's skin on, that's okay. Skin down, always fish skin side down if you're grilling. Then leave it alone. If you've taken the time to build the right temperature, if you've created these different areas of temperature, the heat is going to do the work. Now, people will say, when do I know to turn it over? The meat will talk to you. So think about this. If you've ever touched a hot surface with your thumb, your thumb is sending messages to your brain to pull it away. That's the right temperature. Meat does the same thing on a grill. It's going to lightly pull away. Now, if you're not a good judge of how long it takes, well, you can use a timer if you want, but generally the meat, the chicken or the beef or the pork or the shrimp, it's going to pull away from the grill a little bit. That's when you want to turn it. Now, if you want these beautiful grill marks like a restaurant, just turn it 30, 60, 90 degrees to whatever you want. I generally grill about 80-20, 80% on the first side and 20% on the rest. When do we add the flavorings and the barbecue sauce and the herbs and that type of thing? As close to the end of the cooking process as you can. If they're a high fat item like hot dogs or sausages or that type of thing, be careful of that when you open it up. Generally, I like to grill with the lid open. If you've got the right temperature, that's really grilling for you. What are some other fun things we can grill? Well, it's not just for meats. How about peaches when they come in season? A grilled Caesar salad. Again, we're getting this wonderful flavor that's going on. Just take a nice head of romaine, maybe marinate it with a little bit of your favorite Italian dressing or flavored olive oil. And it's not going to take very long at all. This is going to take the 30 seconds to a minute. Just gets these nice caramelized flavors. Hit it with some Parmesan. It'll melt a little bit. Grilled watermelon. There's just something about this wonderful grilling quality, that this charcoal-y kind of flavor that we add to it. Grilled avocados. Again, marinate them with your favorite Southwest vinaigrette. Maybe a little bit of lime juice on there, a little bit of seasoning. It's not going to take very long, but you're adding beautiful texture to something that already has great texture, the avocado. You could certainly do quesadillas. This is a great way to do it. You can do soft tacos on there, street tacos. And certainly there's lots of desserts you can do on there. Here's some grilled potato chips with a garlic aioli. Aioli is that garlic mayonnaise. Here's a beautiful way to finish the meal. These are grilled citrus brown sugar glazed carrots. So again, they have that nice marinade on them. Just put them on for a short period of time. If you want to leave them crunchy, that's fine. If you want them with a little more flavor. Certainly a grilled cheese, why not? A grilled pineapple, wonderful way to take whole pineapple. Just make a little slurry of maybe some brown sugar. You can introduce some bourbon into that or some rum if you wanted to. Just do a little glaze, the natural sugars. It's just perfect for this. Here's an added bonus for when you're doing dessert or fruits, is that the acid is going to help you clean up that grill a little bit. We certainly can use it for vegetables as well. Again, we're trying to get that beautiful caramelization there. So grilled Brussels sprouts, again, make sure that they're same size there. You're going to have much better cooking with them. Grilled pizza, yes, of course. Why not? Artichokes, absolutely. Grilled pound cake, yes. Make sure there's, it's a nice buttery pound cake in there. Just get this nice sort of wrap up, a little bit different than something s'mores, maybe even a little bit healthier there. So I'm going to stop and give us a little break here and talk about steaming. By all means, please enter any comments or questions in the chat window there. And I'm going to send you a sort of cheat sheet here of all the different techniques. I know we're going through these kind of quickly here. And we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some moist cooking techniques. We're going to talk about steaming and poaching, one of my favorite methods for cooking everything from chicken to fish. And then we'll look at some great foods with all these different techniques. So Come on back. Let's come back in just about 2 minutes. I'm going to freshen my coffee here, and we'll see you in just a minute.